everyone, my name is Amber, welcome back to my channel. This is my March wrap up. I didn't have a great reading month in March, I didn't have a great month in general, nor did the rest of the world. I went from reading 29 books in February to reading 8 books in March, which is kind of a bummer. I was expecting to be able to read more, but I got so distracted. Basically work kicked off, it was so busy because we were trying to come up with some sort of contingency plan for working from home, which is something, or was something we weren't allowed to do before. But we've covered that now. I'm now working from home safely. I had to kind of argue to be allowed to work from home because I live with a high risk person. My manager was great about it, but the directors and CEO were kind of, not to me personally, but they were very slow to react. So that got to me a bit, and then just the idea of the pandemic is getting to me a lot. So that's all I'm going to say about it, because I know it's making some people quite anxious. It's not really making me anxious per se, but it is at the forefront of my mind a lot. So it's taking up a lot of my energy. I'm going to tell you about the 8 books that I read in March because some of them were very, very good. The first book that I read and finished was one that I was reading as a buddy read with my friend Justine. I feel like I mention her in every single video. I do have more friends, but she's one of the ones that I buddy read the most with. And that book was Into the Drowning Deep by Myra Grant. This one is kind of hard science fiction horror. There's a lot of sciencey stuff in this book. It's about I don't even know where to start describing it. I'm so out of practice doing wrap-ups. Okay, so basically there's this group of people who went to make a mockumentary in the Mariana Trench. This group of people disappeared. They were all killed. There was some footage that a media company held onto that showed killer mermaids, basically. No one wanted this getting out into the public eye, and most people didn't actually believe that it's a thing. Another second group of people want to go and investigate what happened in the Mariana Trench and how the tragedy came about. A lot of people who were going along for it did actually believe in the killer mermaids, and they were quite keen to go, and some were related to other people on that first trip. I feel like I'm explaining this really badly, but basically we're following this second group of people as they go to the Mariana Trench as the mermaids come and try to kill them. It's basically pure horror sci-fi, and I actually really enjoyed it. I gave this on 4 stars, and while I was reading it I was kind of hesitant to rate it so highly just because there's a lot of science that bogs this thing down. But then I realised I actually quite like science. It's actually quite a good book for me. The horror stuff was definitely more classic horror in the mermaids were creeping up on people and killing them, and they were always there kind of in the background, but not necessarily things that could be studied, or we couldn't really learn much about them. They were just horrific creatures, and it was quite scary as well. I think Myra Grant definitely excels in writing sciencey stuff because the scientific bits that she wrote in here, you could tell that she adored writing. And I remember reading Feed years ago and thinking the exact same thing, and I didn't love that book, and I haven't actually carried on with the series yet, but that is something that I want to get back into after reading this, because now I've realised I actually quite like the sciencey segments. I don't know if this is going to get a sequel. If anyone knows, please let me know, because the story did wrap up mostly, but then there were kind of hints that there could be a sequel and other things could be discussed or discovered. So I would actually be very interested in reading a sequel, I think, if it was in a different setting, because I don't think if they went back to the Mariana Trench it would be that interesting. Yeah, I would be up for that. I liked this book. Do go and check out Justine's review, which I will link up above, because she's done a full review on it and she's a lot more eloquent than I am. I think I enjoyed the book slightly more than she did. The next book I read was a very popular one, and that is Where the Crawdads Sing. This one absolutely blew up last year. I had no idea what it was about before getting it, but then my friend got it from Waterstones, and then she reminded me that I really wanted to read it given the hype, and so I got it from the library, which is why I don't have a copy here with me. I ended up giving it 3 stars because it wasn't great. It's basically about a young girl who lives with her dad, and the rest of her family, their family, leaves them because the dad's somewhat abusive. So she's living in a cabin in the boonies with her father. She is left to kind of fend for herself. She doesn't get an education or anything. Everyone in the main part of town calls her the Swamp Girl, and it's basically following her throughout her life. But there are also chapters intertwined in there because someone in present day is found dead in the swamp. She's a suspect because everyone suspects the working class. It was very easy to read, and I did really enjoy the setting. I felt like at some points I was in the swamp. I read this while I was in the Netherlands, so 2 very different settings really, but the author did a really good job of capturing my interest, and I felt for the characters somewhat. I just didn't really feel like it's going to stick with me, and it's not really going to be a book that I remember in years to come or whatever. So I gave it 3 stars. It was enjoyable, it was good, but probably not worthy of the hype. I read Clown in a Cornfield, which I received in exchange for an honest review. This one's coming out in either June or July. It's YA horror about a clown, a killer clown, who is going around murdering students. I'm really struggling today, I'm so sorry. This isn't what I was expecting. I was expecting this to be somewhat like There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. It was set during fall, except I think it's actually set during summer. I thought it was going to cover a longer period of time, but it's actually just this one event in the Cornfield where these students have to fight for their lives. Honestly, I thought it was ridiculous. So first of all, it wasn't very well written. Secondly, there was a lot of gore, but not a lot of substance. Thirdly, the characters were just boring and I didn't really care about them. They were definitely no Sydney Prescott, put it that way. I feel like the author is a debut author, and I don't know if it's just he hasn't had much practice in writing. I don't really want to, I don't know, assume. It was very bare bones and I feel like it could have been done better, to be honest. I was quite excited to read a YA horror book because there aren't too many of them, but I didn't really like it. I then read another really popular book, and that was The Sunken Motel, which I gave 3 stars as well. It was good, but fairly average. And I think the main reason I rated this kind of on a mediocre level is because it took me so long to read it. And I think the reason it took me so long to read it was because I read it around the time that work kicked off and the virus kicked off and everything was happening. So it took me 2 weeks to read this 400-page book. It's an adult mystery set in the USA. The main character in the present day goes to the Sundown Motel to find out what happened to her auntie who disappeared back in the day. It also flashes back to the auntie's point of view while she's investigating several murders of young women around town, and it was a really interesting concept. It was also really easy to read. I just didn't love it. I think it's going to be a very enjoyable book for most people. It's just for me, it didn't really stand out as a mystery at all, so I gave it an average rating. And then I read Columbo, which I spoke about in a reading vlog very briefly. I say briefly, I didn't actually really talk about it that much because I didn't enjoy it, and I feel like it's a very sensitive topic for me to kind of bash on, except I'm not really hating on the topic itself. So I gave the book 2 stars. I listened to it as an audiobook, and I think that's where the problem lies because the audiobook was terrible. The narrator sounded like he was bored the entire time. There was no emotion coming through on this audiobook, and I feel like if you're talking about something like that, you need to show some respect and emote a bit, but he didn't. He sounded very robotic. I honestly did not like the book. It also jumped back and forth between the event and the history of the boys and the town, and it didn't really seem to flow very well, so I didn't enjoy it. I found it very difficult to listen to because it's such a horrible topic. Because the narrator sounded like he was bored by the topic, it wasn't very enjoyable, so I gave it 2 stars. I then did another buddy read with my friend Judith, who I haven't done a buddy read with in years, and we've decided to read the entire Throne of Glass series together. So we started with The Assassin's Blade, which is the collection of 5 short stories. This is a reread for me. I know that I read all the way up to and including Queen of Shadows, but then I stopped reading for a bit and I went on my huge long YouTube break, and I didn't pick up Empire of Storms and then any book after that. So we've decided to start rereading together. I really enjoyed the buddy reading experience, but I gave this book 3 stars again because my opinions on it haven't changed since I read it back in 2015, probably earlier. I'm not really one for short stories, which is part of the problem, but also I don't really care about Sam. I'm sorry, I really am, but if I don't care about Sam, then I'm not going to care about any of these short stories, although it is really nice to get some of Selena's backstory because that's always really interesting to me. It's just, I don't really care about the other characters, and I think you do have to read this book in order to understand some of the stuff that happens later on in the series, in my opinion, but it's not the best. And again, I don't really love short stories, so 3 stars for this one. I read another advanced readers copy, and that was Clickbait, which is YA contemporary. It's about a girl who's trying to infiltrate the kind of popular crowd Mean Girls group at her high school because her best friend joined it a few years ago. Something happened to the best friend and she wants to get revenge. It's a very simple story. It's very simple YA contemporary. I did really enjoy it. I liked the concept. I only gave it 3 stars though because it was nothing amazing. I don't think I'm going to remember it much in a couple of months if I ever think about it again. So it didn't really impact me that much, but I did really like the main relationship, I think. From what I can remember, I'm forgetting it already. I liked how dedicated the main character was to her best friend. I didn't really care for the twist. There was a twist somewhere in there, and I guessed it, like I figured it out. The author kind of laid it on quite thick. But nonetheless, I always really enjoy books about rich people drama, and this book is set in California and it's about the kids at school. The kids are children of like movie stars and, I don't know, important people. So they've got a ton of money to throw away, and yeah, it was good. And then I read my favourite book of the month, which is not going to be a surprise to anyone because I keep talking about it in almost every single video, and that is The City of Brass. This is my 3rd time rereading this book, and it's my 3rd time giving it 5 stars because honestly it's incredible. So The City of Brass is about a woman called Nari. It's adult epic fantasy. Nari grew up on the streets of Cairo. She comes across after like various things happen, the jinn, which are mythical beings who, you know, grant wishes, except it's a lot more in depth than that, and she is taken to the city of brass called Daevabad. From there she gets involved in court politics. There are different like factions of the jinn, and they're like kind of battling one another, and then there's the guy who rules all of them, who is super creepy because he is so smart. She gets involved in all of that and the kind of palace drama, so it's told from her point of view and also the point of view of Ali, who is the prince, except he's the second son, so he's not heir to the throne or anything. They meet and they kind of form a friendship. It's all very complicated. The author has done an amazing job of building up this world, and it gets even better in the sequel, which I have also read and I'm going to reread this month. This book is just amazing. I would say even during my rereads it takes me about 70 to 100 pages to get really into it. I think in the beginning you're being bombarded with all this information and all of these different terms. I can't remember if my version has a glossary. I think it does. Yeah, it does. So there's probably a glossary at the back of the US version as well, which is very useful. But after the first 100 pages, honestly, it flies by. Once Nari gets to Daevabad and starts getting involved in the court politics, and once Ali is introduced properly, honestly, it all kicks off and it's amazing. I cannot wait to read The Kingdom of Copper this month. I'm probably going to pick it up very, very soon, probably next week. And then I'm going to read the third book in the trilogy, which is the finale, and I'm so scared about it. This book made me cry. Kingdom of Copper made me cry, so The Empire of Gold is definitely going to make me cry. 5 stars, loved it, cannot recommend it enough. Those are the 8 books that I read in March. Hopefully April goes a bit better. It's going well so far. I'm not really enjoying the books that I'm reading, but I am reading more. Maybe I'm just in a weird mindset, I don't know. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what you thought of any of these books in the comments below, and I'll speak to you all in my next one. Bye.